It's said that the greatest heroes hail from humble origins, and when World War II exploded into the history books, surely nobody would have predicted that a dentist would become one of the world's most elite soldiers. But it's true. Today we're taking a look at the orthodontist who became the first U.S. Navy SEAL. U.S. SEALs are world-renowned as some of the best Special Forces operators in history. Fielding the most advanced and often highly classified equipment anywhere in the world, SEALs are routinely sent to do impossible missions in impossible places. Trained to operate in the sea, air, and land, hence the name SEAL, SEALs are deadly warriors who can reach any target anywhere it chooses to hide. From counterterrorism to direct action missions, SEALs are flexible enough to be sent on a hostage rescue mission one day and to blow up an enemy dam the next. To meet the stringent requirements of the Navy SEALs training program, you must not only be physically tough, but mentally tough as well, with an iron will and an attitude that doesn't know the meaning of the word quit. Yet these legendary warriors can trace their lineage down to a single man, widely recognized as the first unofficial American SEAL. Navy Lieutenant J.G. Jack Taylor's service in World War II preceded the official formation of the U.S. Navy SEALs by almost 20 years, and yet he is the first U.S. commando to have been trained and to have actually operated on the sea, air, and land. As an orthodontist in Hollywood, California, Lieutenant Taylor answered his nation's call to arms. After the surprise Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, a trained boater, Taylor assumed that he would become an instructor teaching boat handling skills to U.S. and Allied soldiers. But during his initial training, he certified on the Lambertson Amphibious Respiratory Unit, a predecessor to modern scuba gear. Having qualified on the water lung as it was known, and with top marks for intelligence and physical fitness, the Office of Strategic Services was quick to recruit him. Established in June 1942, the Office of Strategic Services was America's response to the asymmetrical warfare units of Germany, Japan, and Britain, seeing a need for a different kind of war, a much dirtier type of warfare that would take place behind enemy lines. The United States formed the OSS and gave it a degree of autonomy from the rest of the military, famously recruiting American playboys, socialites, and business elite. The OSS sought out operators who were not just physically fit and could take orders, but who knew their way through social situations and could blend in behind enemy lines. For the majority of the war, the rest of the U.S. military would deride the OSS as a bunch of playboys fooling around at war. But the reality is that OSS operators faced incredible danger and were directly responsible for many of America's greatest successes during the war. OSS operators were trained in intelligence gathering, demolitions, sabotage, and even in recruiting and organizing resistance movements. They had to be able to swim through choppy seas, parachute behind enemy lines, and evade enemy patrols through the wilderness. They brought with them a bag of dirty tricks which could be used to sabotage enemy railway lines, the engines of motor vehicles, or even poison and assassinate high-priority individuals. As was famously said of them, OSS operators were experts in ungentlemanly warfare. Upon being recruited to the OSS, Taylor was assigned to the 1st Underwater Swimmer Group, but was soon redirected to become the chief of the Office of Strategic Service Maritime Unit. The MU, as it was known, was responsible for infiltrating agents and supply resistance groups by sea, conducting maritime sabotage, and developing specialized maritime surface and subsurface equipment and devices. Its operators could be ferrying secret agents past enemy patrols into hostile territory one day and be swimming under the hull of a battleship and attaching an underwater limpet mine to the bottom of the mighty ship the next. Often these small teams of expert divers, boaters, and swimmers could do more damage than several destroyers together could. From September 1943 to March 1944, Taylor found himself operating in the Mediterranean. Here, Germany had been forced to send forces to aid its ally, Italy, after the Italians suffered defeat after defeat to Britain's African forces. With the Allies holding key bases in the Mediterranean, the Axis powers waged a brutal campaign against what they feared would become an Allied toehold, which could lead to an invasion. To support the war, Taylor and his men helped deliver spies to their targets along the Greek and Balkan coasts, as well as weapons, explosives, and other supplies to partisan forces behind enemy lines. As the Germans devastated Ally supply convoys, Taylor and his men became critical in quickly delivering critical supplies to Allied forces, his small, agile boat proving difficult to spot from the air. For 3 months, though, Taylor left the sea behind to personally lead a team of commandos behind enemy lines in central Albania. There, Taylor and his men carefully scouted out and reported on the location of enemy fortifications, supply dumps, and artillery positions. He would also shadow major troop movements and relay their plans via radio. Aware that a team of enemy spies was in the area, the Germans hunted for Taylor and his men time and again. Yet on 3 separate times, Taylor and his men narrowly avoided the German ambushes. For his daring feats behind enemy lines, Taylor would be nominated for the Army's Distinguished Service Cross. But being a sailor was instead awarded the Navy Cross. After D-Day and the successful landings at Normandy, the Allies began a push toward Germany itself. In Italy, Allied forces fought a brutal campaign north, pushing back the Germans inch by inch. The whole way, Allied forces were helped by partisan groups who had often been fighting the Germans for years behind enemy lines. Yet, as the Allies prepared to break out of Italy, military planners realized that they had no contact with partisan groups in Austria. In order to break Germany's grip on Europe, the Allies would need the help of these freedom fighters, but making contact would be an extremely dangerous undertaking, and exactly the type of mission the men of the OSS were perfect for. Personally picked to lead a 4-man team into Austria, Taylor was tasked with making contact with Austrian partisans and gathering intelligence on German troops and fortifications. Parachuting into Austria would fulfill Taylor's air requirement of a Sea-Air-Land Commando, and he became the first U.S. soldier to conduct commando missions in all 3 domains. However, the mission ran into trouble almost from the get-go, with the pilots unable to drop the team's radios and other major equipment after the men had jumped. Accompanied by 3 Austrian corporals liberated from a POW camp, one of them became extremely ill in the first few days following the jump, and Taylor was injured on the jump. Nonetheless, the team gathered what equipment they could and began their mission to collect intelligence and make contact with friendly Austrian partisan forces. The team would photograph many German defensive positions and made contact with and ascertained the loyalty of various anti-German groups. As the mission neared its end, they formed a network of supporters who could be counted on to aid the Allies when the major push into Europe began. Yet, without a radio to communicate their critical information, the team was forced to attempt to slip through German lines and into Italy to rejoin Allied forces. On the night before their escape attempt, Taylor and his men were ambushed at their safe house and captured by German forces. Delivered to the Gestapo, the Germans slapped and kicked Taylor around, trying to force him to admit that he was a civilian and not a U.S. officer, which would have exempted him from the Geneva Convention protections. Taylor steadfastly refused to make the false confession, and eventually he was transferred to a holding cell and taken to a new interrogation. There, his interpreter would end up being an undercover Allied agent who was so visibly shaken at recognizing Taylor that in a later report Taylor would say that he was afraid the agent would blow his cover. The German commander asked about Taylor's mission and then asked why the Americans were bombing them when they had never once launched an attack against the US. Taylor quickly pointed out the fact that the only reason the Germans hadn't bombed the US was because they were thankfully out of range. Then the commander asked him how long he had thought the war would last, and Taylor said 6 months, to which the commander agreed. However, when he asked him who would win and Taylor said the Allies, the commander laughed. In less than a year, the Germans would surrender. After 4 months of interrogations, Taylor was eventually transferred to the infamous extermination camp of Mauthausen. After the guards discovered that Taylor was an American officer, he initially received humane treatment, even being offered cigarettes and brandy. Yet when he refused to cooperate with his interrogators, he was stripped of his legal status as a captured POW and instead labeled as a political prisoner. This was a violation of the Geneva Convention, but allowed the Germans to dispose of him as they wished. His uniform was taken away, and he was forced to dress in civilian clothing. He was beaten several times and witnessed numerous executions of other prisoners. During his stay at Mauthausen, Taylor was twice scheduled for execution, but the first time a friendly worker in the camp's political office spotted his execution order in a stack of orders for other prisoners. The worker snuck Taylor's order away and secretly burned it. The German camp officers, however, eventually realized that Taylor was still alive when he very much shouldn't have been, and scheduled a second execution. Before the date arrived, though, the German guards fled the camp as the American 11th Armored Division approached and liberated it. Just a few hours after liberation, Taylor was being filmed by an American film crew who was documenting the various prisoner and extermination camps. He gave the filmmakers a detailed account of daily life for the prisoners, as well as the inhumane and cruel actions of the guards. At the Nuremberg trials after the war, Taylor would testify as a key witness against the German war criminals, ensuring their sentencing for crimes against humanity. Lieutenant Taylor preceded the official establishment of the U.S. Navy SEALs by almost 20 years, and yet his courage and actions behind enemy lines set the standard for what would be expected of future SEALs. While he may never have officially been one, each new American SEAL can trace back their warfighting heritage to the man who was the first American commando to operate from the sea, air, and land. Think you have what it took to be a World War II commando? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked this video, make sure you watch our other video, The Insanely Crazy Story of a Tiny Soldier. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content.